Well, my husband and I got married a little bit later than most people do, and exactly 6 weeks after we were married, my grandmother died. She was the last of my living grandparents, and I have to admit that I was so sad that my husband would not have the opportunity to get to know her, my grandfather, my great-grandmother, so many of these people that had had such an impact in my life. And there are these times that we both kind of mourn the fact that if we had just met sooner and married sooner, we would have had that opportunity to really get to experience each other's families in deep ways. So in trying to fill in the gaps, I find that I don't turn to a laundry list of facts about people. I turn to stories that really seem to capture their personality and their impact. I kind of feel like our family lore is rather legendary because it is so funny and has so many unexpected twists and turns. And I think one of our family favorites was gathering every summer in Arkansas at my great-grandmother's house. We gathered on a place that we affectionately called Glory Hill to stuff ourselves with some of the most amazing of Southern fried cooking. And then we would spend our afternoons inner tubing down the White River that was nearby. My great-great-grandmother, who was actually alive for much of this, would stay at the house, and everybody from my great-grandmother on down to the youngest person that was there would go to the White River to ride the rapids. Perhaps the essence of my great-grandmother was found on these days. She was a holiness preacher, had been an evangelist for over 60 years of her life, and she knew that any godly woman would be found wearing a dress. But she also knew that a godly woman was modest, and here she was presented with a dilemma. How can I be modest wearing my dress, sitting on an inner tube, going down the river? So, to solve this dilemma, she would put on her cotton dress. She grabbed tube socks that she put up all the way up to her knees. She would then get men's mechanic coveralls that were kind of khaki color, and she put it on over everything. It had long sleeves, she zipped it all up. She was very afraid of skin cancer, so she then slathered her face with this really thick sunscreen and put on glasses that covered about half of her face and topped it off with a southern floral bonnet. Now, to protect her hands, she put on large white gardening gloves, but she was afraid she would lose them in the water. So she got those big safety pins that you use on diapers, and she safety pinned her gloves to her coveralls, and then she put on these big blue loafers at the end. Now, surprisingly, as we're going down the river, my great-grandmother could not swim. So to make sure that she was safe, she got one of those bright orange-red life preservers and put it on and strapped it on tight. Now, she was a large woman. She was just shy of 6 feet, very large boned. And her inner tube of choice was a tractor inner tube. But you can imagine that once you sit in the tractor inner tube, you can't exactly maneuver well. So on one side, she used this thick rope, and she tied a paddle that we'd use for an inflatable raft so that she could actually maneuver in the water. On the other side, she used a similar rope where she tied a coffee mug and a thermos of coffee so that in the quieter parts of the river, she could actually sit there and sip her nice, strong, hot coffee. Now, if you've ever been inner tubing in a spring-fed river, you know that it is cold. Most of us would just take our inner tube and go to the low bridge, and we would just kind of jump off and get it over with very quickly. My great-grandmother did not have that ability to do so. So with the help of my grandfather, she would very slowly inch her way into this cold water. And as the water would rise, so did the volume of her voice. And you would hear her, "Oh my goodness. Oh my Lord, have mercy!" Until it was the fateful moment in which she had to sit down in the inner tube, to which she shrieked out, "Oh my stars and garters!" It was a sight to behold. But my great-grandmother, she was generous in her laugh. She had an amazing sense of humor, a wonderful sense of adventure. She loved her family. And as this incident also proved, she was also quite crazy. And anybody in the family knew that. But if you ever wanted to get to know Clancy, this is the story that I tell. And I think most families are like this. We have people we want others to know, and instead of listing the facts, we find that story that just pulls back the curtain, gives us the glimpse of the true nature of this person that we love and that we want others to know. And our passage today does this very thing. John sets out to give us an account of the Jesus that he knew and loved and had experienced an intense 3 years with. During that time, he had come to believe that this Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God, and he had all of these stories swirling around in his head. But John tells us that he goes and he starts sifting through them, and he selects a few specific miracles to tell us about for the express purpose that we too would come to believe that this Jesus is the Messiah.
Amen.
So in his gospel, we get a brief introduction to Jesus in chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, we get to this first miracle or sign that John specifically wants to tell us about. We don't find it anywhere else in any of the gospels, so this is a really special story to John. And I think we would be amazed but unsurprised if the first story that John tells us is about Jesus healing someone, or perhaps Jesus feeding this huge crowd who find themselves in the desert place without any provisions. But no, those are stories 2 and 3. This first story is a story about a wedding that Jesus and his disciples kind of seem to get invited to because they happen to be in the area and his mom is really the invited guest. Perhaps their presence upset the numbers in the carefully planned provisions. But whatever the case is, we find in the opening of this story that Jesus' mother looks around and she realizes that the wedding party is out of wine. It is a huge embarrassment, a social gaffe that can start this couple off on the wrong foot in their community, and she wonders what can be done. Now, there are many ways to read this text, but I cannot help but read it as a mom who is very conscious of details and of when things are not going to plan. I am such a planner that even if I have nothing to do with what's going on, if I see something going amiss in an event, I'm so anxious for the people running it, and I have to really fight to not just jump in and start trying to fix everything. And so I really appreciate Mary's response. She notices the lack, she wants to help, and she knows that Jesus can do something about it. Though a few of the disciples that are with Jesus now are starting to believe, they don't really know Jesus yet. They don't know what he's able to do. But our dear beloved Mary, from the moment the angel shows up, knows and believes. And so she does what any good mom would do.
Yeah.
She subtly hints, they have no more wine. Now, it's not exactly a direct command. It's that subtle way that moms talk that gets the point across quite indirectly. Moms are masters at this. It is just one sentence, but it says an entire paragraph. Oh no, they ran out of wine, they didn't plan correctly, and now they're going to be humiliated, and you and your friends kind of were last minute guests, and you didn't supply anything, and now they're out, and this is such a travesty. If only there was some way we could help. Oh wait, I know somebody. It's my son. He happens to be the Messiah, and I know that he is merciful, powerful, and has a soft spot for the lonely.
Yeah.
Jesus, they have no more wine. And Jesus just walks in step with Mary, and he's like, and what is that to you and me? My time hasn't come. And I can hear the humor in this. It's almost as if Jesus leans over and he's like, Mom. But she hears everything she needs to in Jesus' response, because she turns to the servants and she just says, do whatever he tells you. And in that moment, she's satisfied. She made her point, and she knows that Jesus is going to take it from there. So these servants then turn from her to Jesus looking for instructions. And so Jesus looks around and he notices that there are some ceremonial washing jars nearby that were empty. So Jesus says, okay, fill those up to the brim with water, take some of that out and give it to the master of the ceremonies. And I can't imagine all that's going on in these servants' minds. It's got to be a crate. They're like, what? This is going to solve, what are we doing? Or should we do this? We don't know how the miracle takes place. We don't know whether the moment that the jars fill with water that it becomes wine. We don't know if it turns into wine as the servants are walking in obedience to Jesus' command. We don't know if it turns into wine the moment that the master of the ceremonies drinks it. But what we do know is that Jesus made wine out of water, and he made a lot of it. In total, he made somewhere between 120 to 180 gallons of wine. And if you wanted to see the equivalent, if you put those in our modern 750 ml bottles, It comes to somewhere between 605 and 908 bottles. I think that's more than enough to sustain a party. And when the master tastes this wine, he's so surprised. And he calls the bridegroom over and he's like, dude, like, wow, don't you know you're supposed to serve this first? Like, this is amazing. And then we get to the end of our scene. Now, as I prepared this sermon, I did wonder if perhaps this would be one of the more attended or listened to chapels, because we're talking about wine and how Jesus seems to supply wine for a party.
Right.
Surely, Dr. Scheuermann, you have something to say about whether we should drink, and more importantly, whether we have grounds to petition a change to the Wheaton Community Covenant. But I'm sorry to disappoint you. This is not that sermon, because this text is not trying to make this particular point. Because whatever you make out of this text of Jesus turning the water to wine, we have to let the text speak. And it's at the close of this story that we get a clear understanding of why this story is included and what we should make of it. After John is done recounting this event, his commentary picks up, and he says the most extraordinary thing. This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. And I'm really struck by this summation. In this miracle, John says Jesus puts his glory on display for the first time, and it was such a display that it garnered faith. Part of me wonders if John maybe included this because this is the first moment that he believed. And if that was a truly impactful moment for him, of course he would want others to know as well. I wonder, because at first glance, I actually struggle to see how this really reveals Jesus' glory. Raise the dead, heal the sick, calm the storm, yeah. But change water to wine to save the reputation of a bride and groom? Okay. So let's take a few moments and go back to this story and see if we might find some clues that will actually pull back the curtain for us. First, when John opens his gospel and says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us," he really meant that Jesus came and dwelled among us. What better way to show God's involvement, concern, and intervention in the human predicament than for him to show up at a wedding, to celebrate with a couple and their community, and to help them out in a moment of need? There's not much else that is more human than this. Jesus really was there in the everyday events of life. Jesus really did live among us, and he really did come to intervene for us. Second, notice that out of everything Jesus could have chosen, he picked the water pots that were central to Jewish ceremonies, and he changed their use. No more water for purification. These were now to hold wine. And perhaps the symbolism is lost on us, but I don't think it was the disciples. They knew that the coming of the Messiah was to be marked with feasting and drinking.
Yes.
Isaiah 25 says that when the Lord comes, he will spread a wonderful feast for everyone. It will be a delicious feast of good food with clear, well-aged wine and choice beef. Amos 9 promises that when God restores the kingdom of David, the grain and the grapes will grow faster than they can be harvested. The terraced vineyards in the hills of Israel will drip with sweet wine. The people returned from exile will plant vineyards and gardens and eat the crops and drink the wine from them. Joel promised that in the end days, the mountains will drip with sweet wine and the hills will flow with milk. These first disciples who were with Jesus had heard John the Baptist's testimony, and in following Jesus had begun to believe. And Jesus had told them in chapter 1 that they were going to start seeing some really great things. So they're prepared to look. And lo and behold, the first thing that this Messiah does is turn ceremonial water pots into wine vats, giving them a glimpse of the overflow promised in God's coming kingdom. So in other passages, when Jesus goes on to announce the kingdom of God is at hand, the disciples could remember those brimming full pots of wine and recognize that God's kingdom was indeed breaking in and coming to pass in the present. Third, and perhaps most importantly, Jesus reveals his creative and creational power. Look again at what Jesus does. He could have just filled the bottles that had already been drained. But had he done that, perhaps people would have said, oh, the servants just forgot some of the wine. He could have just replaced the wine with similar wine. But no, Jesus pulls out all the stops to show that he has the power of creation. He takes ordinary water and he makes something new and exquisite. And it is new wine that is better than anything that they had before. Okay, that's cool, you say. But again, how does this show Jesus' glory as the Messiah? Well, let's consider this moment, for the moment, one of the key themes in the book of John. John's gospel draws deeply on the creation narrative. Genesis 1 tells us, in the beginning. John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. What does this God do? He creates the heavens and the earth. What does the Word do? Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of the world. The one difference is that in John's account, this God steps down into his creation to dwell and to live and to shine God's glory. And John uses creational language and imagery throughout his gospel to explain that Jesus, as fully human and fully God, comes to inaugurate a new creation. He really is the one they've been looking for. And to prove this beyond doubt, the first miracle John records is one in which Jesus creates, in which everything in heaven and earth is at his command, in which the blessing and the fruitfulness and the life of people is a major concern. In this moment, Jesus takes something ordinary and he makes it something extraordinary. He doesn't just make wine, he makes the best wine. He doesn't just make a few bottles, he makes an abundance. He doesn't just save face for the bride and groom, he elevates them.
Yes.
And friends, the same Jesus who revealed his glory by being present in the midst of human life, by repurposing water pots for kingdom wine vats, by creating something new and extraordinary, is present here and now among us to give us a taste of his kingdom and to create something new and extraordinary out of our lives. So what does this mean for us? First, it means that in those everyday, ordinary moments of life, when you wonder whether God cares, whether God is near, whether God is really concerned with your needs, whether God is a God who rejoices with you, you can look back at this first miracle and remember, God came near in order to dwell and to intervene. Jesus has promised to be with us to the end of the age. He is near. He is concerned with the matters that concern you. He is involved, intervening, and celebrating with you. Second, it means that when we look around us and it seems like we're surrounded with confusion and worry and turmoil, when we see a political season that is threatening to tear our country apart and it feels like it's fearful moving forward, when we can't see what's ahead, when we wish there was more clarity and less fog, we can look back to this first miracle and take courage. God's kingdom is already breaking in. It is a kingdom that brings justice and righteousness and peace and abundance and shalom. And even when we haven't realized the fullness of God's kingdom yet, we can already start tasting the wine that says God's kingdom will come and God's will be done. And we have hope because our future is already breaking into this world and nothing in heaven and earth can prevail against it. Third, it means that when we find ourselves in need, when our resources are tapped out, when we're tired, when we don't think that what we have is enough, when our bottles are empty and there is still more work to do, when what we thought would be is not what is transpiring, we can look back to this first miracle and have confidence that our God is a God who doesn't just patch up and restore the status quo. He is a God who creates and makes things new. He is a God unlimited by our constraints. He sees overflow where there is lack. He sees clear, well-aged wine where there is emptiness. He sees something exquisite where there is need. And there is nothing in your life or mine that is beyond his power to see, to reimagine, and to recreate. Jesus' glory is revealed in being the God who sees and responds, who creates and sustains, who is rich in mercies and provision. And this Jesus is still in the business of revealing his glory through creative and creational power in our lives that takes nothing and makes it something, that takes ordinary and makes it extraordinary, that sees need and provides abundance, that hears cries for help and far exceeds our expectations. What is your need today? What is your empty bottle? What is your concern? What is your lack? If Jesus can take a pot filled with water and change it to heavenly vintage wine, Jesus can take your small, broken, insignificant, empty, and ordinary things and turn them into something overflowing with abundance, richness, and blessing for you, for the world, and ultimately for God's glory. Amen.
Amen.